In today's video, I'm going to show you some of the most recent changes that have come to Copilot Studio. In just over a week, we're going to have Microsoft Ignite. And if the keynotes from Ignite this year are going to be anything like what we saw last year, we're going to get a whole slew of exciting new announcements and features related to Microsoft Copilot Studio. But without further ado, let's show you what's already started to make its way into the product. Welcome back to another episode of OnlyCopilotFans. I'm your host, AJ Ansari. If you've been using Copilot Studio for any length of time, you've probably come to terms with the fact that it is always changing. In the Copilot Studio world, change is the only constant. So it should come as no surprise that around the October-November timeframe, when Microsoft releases Wave 2 for its Power Platform and Dynamics 365 apps, we have gotten a ton of new features in Copilot Studio. Now, I'm not going to go over every feature and function that was released, but the other day I logged into one of my early access or my preview environments of Copilot Studio, and I saw some significant changes to the user interface, and I thought it's worth going over really quick with you. Now, as I said in the introduction, Microsoft Ignite is just a week away. And if it's going to be anything like last year's Ignite, we're going to get a ton of announcements about Copilot Studio's features, functions, and much more. So this just might be the start of what I'm going to see over the coming few days. Already today, the day I'm shooting this video, it's Wednesday, the 13th of November, Microsoft announced that OpenAI released its newest GPT family of models, which is GPT5.1, and that has been added the very same day to Copilot Studio. So that's a welcome arrival. So even as I make this video just earlier in the day, there's a new feature. But let's go ahead and start looking at those user interface changes I was telling you about, and let's go over them in quick order. First, I'm looking at a traditional standard release environment of Copilot Studio, and you are seeing something that I would imagine you're very comfortable with. The home screen where you can describe to create your agent, your list of recent agents, your create agent flow and tools type of interface. And if I were to contrast this with the new interface, you'll be shocked that for the first time, Microsoft has done a significant rebuild and redesign. Now, the first thing that I spotted when I came and looked at it is I no longer had the create button. So whenever I make an agent, my way of doing that is typically by clicking create. While we've always had a describe to create, it's really not something I've used before. But in the new paradigm, I have to use this if I want to create a new agent, or I use this action. But it's going to act a little bit differently, each of these, depending on which way I choose. So let's first go and look at how we would do it the old school way. The old school way, if I wanted to create an agent, I would hit create. It would take me to the screen where I could choose from a template or a managed agent. And then if I wanted to build my own, I would get the describe screen where I could describe, talk to Copilot, give it some information about the persona of the agent, and so on, a name for the agent. And then when I wanted to, I could configure the rest of the agent, use the playground, change my default language, etc., and then create it. Well, in the new paradigm, this is how it would work in each of the two options that are available to me. Option one looks like I would typically, instead of create, I would be tempted to say create agentic automations. This is the new way to create an agent. Well, except that when I click it, it does not give me the describe, configure, and the playground. It takes me straight into an agent. Now, I do like one thing about it in that it is the quickest way to getting into an agent when I'm trying to build one. I no longer have to go through a wizard if I'm not interested in the wizard. If I'm comfortable creating my own description, writing my own system instructions, etc., there is no need for me to go through the song and dance, as it were, of the describe, configure, playground test, etc. In most cases, people aren't doing any playground testing because you may not even have added any knowledge or any tools at that point in time, frankly. So it just, people forego all of that and eventually try to get here as soon as possible. Anyways, However, if you did still want to be able to do all of that, you have to now go into this describe area and you have to describe what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So this is where I could say you are a financial analyst and will help analyze general ledger information from Dynamics 365. And once I type this, I'm now greeted with that familiar describe page. It's going to try to ask me some more questions. If I want to, I can configure my agent. I can choose my language and do all the things that I'm used to doing. Now, I do want to highlight one other thing, by the way. In this new feature, this new describe area, unlike the old one, I now have a little gears icon. And the gear icon is going to allow me to choose the default language for my agent. It will also allow me to do some advanced settings like a schema name, as well as a solution where I want my agent to be stored in or to be part of. The next thing that is very different is workflows have taken more than just a kind of a menu item on the navigation pane. Now I can create a new workflow from here or describe to create a new workflow. Now, for those of you who haven't already tried this before, in the old or the standard interface as well, you can do workflow creations that are not just tied to the agent. So most of us usually create an agent flow from inside of our agent, and that would trigger an agent that starts with a trigger or a flow that starts with a trigger when an agent calls the flow. And it usually terminates with respond to the agent. Well, in case you haven't noticed, and as you see over here, you have the ability to build fully fledged flows just like you would in Power Automate. Now, if I'm a betting man, and I've said this before in my boot camps and I've said this before in my sessions, I would think that eventually Microsoft would sunset the Power Automate brand. Not Power Automate itself, but the Power Automate brand, and probably bring everything under the agent flow umbrella in Copilot Studio. A few reasons why I say that, or at least a main reason I say this, is because over time, Microsoft has slowly but surely brought all the capabilities, almost all of the capabilities of Power Automate flows into Copilot Studio. This looks, works, and feels like Power Automate. The key difference here is that this lives in a different solution, and that this is built on the Copilot Studio plan, as it were, which can be against your credits or your Azure pay-as-you-go plan. Whereas Power Automate is going to bill either on the free or the Power Automate premium licenses. This also means, or not necessarily this also means, but what we also see is in the Copilot Studio plan, we are going to have access to all of the premium connectors without having to pay for that Power Automate premium plan. Here you do the pay-as-you-go model. So if I were a betting man, I would bet that this would happen sometime in the next year or two, or who knows, we might even see a shock announcement at Microsoft Ignite about something along those lines. I'm certainly not speaking from any position of knowledge. This is just really my pure thought process on kind of reading tea leaves and kind of making an educated guess on where all this is going. But going back in, so aside from flows, the other key difference that I see is creating and working with computer use agents. So create computer using agent, or the CUA scenario. For those of you who are not familiar, this is where your agent can work with user interfaces and click on buttons and do other things. Now, at this point in time, per the documentation, this is only supported for the Windows operating system. I am recording this on a MacBook using Mac OS, as you can probably tell from the icons that I have on the top left of my browser. So to my knowledge, it's not possible. I do intend to make some videos on this capability sometime very soon from a Windows 365 environment that I have. But one difference here in the new user interface compared to what we used to have before. Let's take a quick look. So this was the old mechanism. And in the old mechanism, if I wanted to work with CUA, I would have to go within an agent first. I'd have to go create an agent, then go to tools and then create a new tool and then select computer use. Now I can forego all of that and just start by clicking create computer using agent. This would whip up an agent for me and then bring up the new computer use prompt box. And there I can describe with some instructions what this is supposed to do and so on and so forth. So another change, certainly. And then let's look at a couple more things. I have noticed, by the way, that even within my standard release cycle environment, I see some different experiences between agents I've already created before and agents I am now creating. So one of those is in that agents I've created before, and some of them I see a triggers and channels, where in some of the newer agents I'm still just seeing triggers. I've noticed that the models that are maybe available to me in some of my existing agents, if I've chose GPT-4o, that remains the default model. But what you'll find is that in all of the newly created models, or all the newly created agents, excuse me, just tripping over myself a little bit here, the default model is now GPT 4.1. So this, I think, started to come into effect sometime last week. And then you might see, depending on if it's an existing agent and when it was created, you may not see all of the models. Here you can see I'm seeing for O, this is a retired model. You have that ability to continue using retired models for 30 days if you have a mission critical agent. And then you have your 4.0, which 4.1, which is a default, the 5 auto, 5 reasoning. And I've also enabled, and I've got the Cloud Sonnet 4.5 and the Cloud Opus 4.1 external agents. In my new user interface, however, I've got a few different models as well. So today, OpenAI announced the release of its latest LLM in the GPT family, GPT 5.1. And shortly, I think almost within the hour, we saw Microsoft also make an announcement on LinkedIn and through other channels that Copilot Studio is going to get GPT 5.1 right away as well. So in my preview environment, where I have all the other new features, when I do a drop down, you will see I've got the GPT 5.1 chat and 5.1 reasoning alongside the other models. So a couple of core differences that you can see here. If you haven't had a chance to build or work in a preview environment and you're not sure how to do that, let me do a quick show. I've got another entire video on my YouTube channel without audio on doing that, on kind of creating a new environment. But just very quickly, when you are working with Power Platform, or go to the Power Platform Admin Center, go to Manage, and you can create a new environment and give an environment a name, choose Developer. Obviously, if you're doing this for development, if you're doing production, I would typically not recommend using the new features. It's going to be a little risky, and then make sure you choose the get new features early. This will create an environment that's got access to those preview features that I've got. Otherwise, you're going to see standard. So you can see in my list here, standard release cycle. This is where I've got those traditional features, and then everything that I was showing you, the new interface and all, that's all part of the early release cycle environments. If you've got any questions, feel free to write them in the comments below. If you haven't already done so, please hit the like and subscribe button, and tune back in for another OnlyCopilotFans video very soon. Take care and have a great day.